ReDrivers. To celebrate the 20th anniversary of the release of Driver Parallel Lines, BD7 has developed a new mod. As you may have guessed, it's an helicopter mod that we will be showcasing today. It is actually the first release within the MOS framework. For mode-oriented scripting system, the idea is to integrate Lua scripting into Driver Parallel Lines to leverage this easy-to-use language and enable new game mechanics such as the helicopter, although it is still a work in progress. What makes this especially interesting is that this is not just another simple swap or visual change, but the kind of experiment that can completely change how we interact with the game. Driver Parallel Lines is a game we know mostly from the street level, with its chases, traffic, police and the rhythm of Manhattan seen from behind the wheel. So, the moment you can suddenly leave the ground and look at the city from above, even in a prototype form, it gives a completely different perspective on a game that many of us have been exploring for years. That is why I think this mod is so exciting already. Beyond the helicopter itself, it also shows what kind of future ideas could become possible through this framework if the scripting side keeps evolving. As a long-time Driver Parallel Lines player, achieving this goal feels incredible. I remember trying many times to enter an helicopter in this game, convinced that a glitch or bug would allow me to do so. After discovering a way to go underwater with the right timing of TKs rolling when leaving a car, and finding out that it was possible to control police NPCs in Driver 3 if you were on the same X-axis thanks to the underworld glitch, I had the idea of somehow getting inside an helicopter by rolling at the exact time, in the hope that I would somehow enable the helicopter controls. Near the Manhattan safe house in the PlayStation 2 version, there is a stationary helicopter on a rooftop. You can also see it in the Gatecrasher mission in 2006. It is where I tried. Needless to say, I wasn't successful, so this mod clearly makes a long-held dream come true. And I think many long-time players will understand that feeling immediately, because driver games have always invited this kind of experimentation. You see an object in the world, something that looks functional enough, and you start wondering whether the developers maybe left an hidden possibility, a strange glitch, or some half-finished features buried under the surface. In a way, that is part of the charm of revisiting these games years later, not only playing them as intended, but also testing their limits and imagining what could have been. In the case of Parallel Lines, helicopters were always one of those objects that looked like just close enough to the player fantasy. They were there flying around the city, but still clearly outside of your reach. So to finally break that barrier, even through modding rather than a natural glitch, is incredibly satisfying. You can already fly forwards and backwards, turn left and right, and change elevation. Thanks to McNally, there are no collisions when using the helicopter because the controls are a bit stiff at the moment. It is still amazing to be able to navigate the pickapple by air and rediscover some parts of the environment. What I like the most when using it is precisely that sense of rediscovery. From the ground you notice the roads, the traffic density, the routes you know by heart after years of gameplay, but from the air your attention shifts completely. You start noticing the spacing between the streets, the rooftops, the parks, the waterfront, the bridges, and the overall shape of the city in a way that the game almost never asks you to consider. Of course, the environment was not built with free aerial exploration in mind, so some places look rougher than others, and certain details obviously were never meant to be inspected from above. But that is part of the fun too, because it gives you a kind of behind-the-scenes look at the illusion of the city. You get to appreciate both the strength of the map design and its technical shortcuts at the same time. Even if it works as a dedicated mod, I would still advise to couple it with the DPL hook to access other useful cheats such as infinite health and no card damage. If you are not familiar with DPL hook, as I read on Reddit not long ago that many people not knowing it, check out my other video showcasing this powerful modding tool. In any case, the current recommendation is to use a bike before enabling the helicopter, as you will understand soon why. First, of course, you need to download the mod and put the files in the main game directory. Now, get on the bike and press F8. This will spawn an helicopter and put you directly inside it. You can then use the keyboard arrows to move around and the numbers 1 and 2 on your numeric keypad to change elevation. You can edit these keys by editing the text file in the most scripts folder. In my case, I use L and M to avoid conflicts with the DPL hook input binding. To leave the helicopter, press F8 again, and this is why DPL hook is recommended to avoid a deadly fall. That is also why I would personally recommend approaching the mod first as a fun prototype and exploration tool rather than expecting a polished aircraft system from the beginning. The controls work, the concept works, and the freedom is already there, but part of the enjoyment comes from understanding that you are using something experimental. In fact, that can make it even more interesting because you start paying attention not only to what the mod already does, but also to what it suggests for the future. Could the movement become smoother? Could the camera be improved further? Could collisions one day be made meaningful instead of being disabled for convenience? These are the kind of questions that naturally come to mind while playing with it, and for a first release in a new framework, I think that is already a very good sign. As you know, helicopters are already in the game, but the NPC ones are limited to the streets when it comes to following you, a significant limitation and paradox of their supposed extended freedom. It is fixed by this mod, since you can truly go anywhere, parks, water, bridges, across buildings, and so on. The details of the city were not designed for such use, of course, but it is still fun to fly around. It also changes the scale of the city in a very noticeable way. When you play normally, parallel lines can feel quite large because you are constrained by the roads, by traffic, by intersections, and by the normal flow of driving. Once you are in the air, distances suddenly feel shorter, routes become more direct, and landmarks connect differently in your mind. It is a bit like learning the city all over again, except now with the ability to ignore the rules that normally define the gameplay. That contrast is fascinating because it highlights just how Driver Parallel Lines is built around the sensation of ground movement. By stepping outside of that design, even briefly, you realize how much the original experience depends on being limited to the street. So, the mod is fun as a toy, of course, but it is also a great way to look at the game itself from another angle, almost analytically McNally. Another thing you can do with this mod is make the helicopter follow you while you are on foot or in another vehicle. To do this, spawn the helicopter with F6 or F8, then press F8 again to leave the helicopter, and then press F7 to make it follow you. Unlike the regular police ones, this is not limited to streets, so the mod has really improved the path limitations there. I think this follower option is also one of the most amusing parts of the rule release because it opens the door to situations that feel much more dynamic than the usual NPC helicopter behavior. You can imagine using it while driving at high speed, while running on foot, or even just for cinematic purposes, if you want to make a short scene or capture unusual footage. In the vanilla game, helicopters often feel present more as atmosphere than as truly free-moving entities. So, seeing one follow you with fewer path restrictions makes a surprising difference. It instantly feels more alive, more reactive, and in some situations almost more like the kind of police support you would expect conceptually from an helicopter. Even if it remains a modding experiment for now, that alone already shows how much a small change in behavior can improve the illusion. Bikes are recommended since they blend best with the helicopter model, but you can use any vehicle before pressing F8 for different results. It's up to you how you use the tool. As a prototype developed over a few days, I've already had fun with it, and I can't wait to see how it can be improved. And that is probably the most exciting part of all this. If it is already possible in only a few days as a prototype, then it becomes very easy to imagine what later iterations might bring. Maybe smoother handling, maybe better transitions when entering or leaving the helicopter, maybe more advanced behaviors for follower mode, or even more ambitious mechanics connected to missions and scripted events. More broadly, it shows that Driver Parallel Lines still has untapped potential for modding despite its age. For players, that means fresh ways to revisit the game. For modders, it means a new proof of concept that can inspire other experiments. And for the community as a whole, it is one more reminder that Parallel Lines still has room for creativity, surprises, and long-term projects 20 years after release, which is honestly wonderful to see. BD7 has developed this, but not just that, for Driver Parallel Lines, so check his channel to see his other work in progress, including new missions. I know many of you love Driver Parallel Lines. One more thing I really appreciate with this kind of release is that it gives you a reason to return to the game even if you already know it extremely well. Sometimes a new mod is valuable not because it is perfectly finished, but because it makes you curious again. It makes you launch the game with a different mindset, revisit old places, try silly ideas, test boundaries, and ask yourself what else might now be possible. It is exactly that sort of energy that keeps an old game alive in the community, so even if the helicopter is still a work in progress, I think it already succeeds at something very important. It makes Parallel Lines feel new again, if only for a moment, and that is something I will never take for granted with a driver game. And thanks to my ReDrivers for supporting the channel: DriverDimension.com, Nirosins, FreshContact, Paul Lanois, Mutt, Ponny, and David Autosport. Click on the join button to join the club. And in any case, see you soon, drivers.